Join our staff and leaders of our church as we journey through topics that inform, engage, and inspire the daily life of our church.
Hello and welcome to the Roundtable with Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church. Today we are going to be talking about the season of Lent. My name is Kathleen McMurray and I am one of the pastors.
Hi, I'm Abbey Maynard. I'm one of the pastors.
Jay Clark, one of the pastors.
And I'm Rowland, and I'm the minister to youth and families.
So first of all, for our audience who may or may not be familiar with the church calendar, the liturgical calendar, as we call it, what is Lent? Don't all answer at once.
It's not just the stuff you pick out of your pockets.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, good distinction. Lent versus Lent.
That's right.
Yes, this one is spelled with an E.
Yes.
Right. It's like, Bethlehem as opposed to Bethlehem. Yeah, not really.
So what is the Lent with an E?
It is a 40-day season in preparation of Easter.
Yay!
Well done.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
Anyone else have anything that they want to add?
When I describe it for our teenagers that are kind of just getting acquainted with even the idea of a spiritual season, I like to talk about it as a 40-day interruption of our regularly scheduled programming. And that's where part of the practices of Lent come in, and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. Jay?
No. To me, it's very similar to a practice that we do in Advent. To me, it's a season of waiting, of preparing for, and I know we'll get to the other pieces of Lent and Holy Week later, but, it always reminds me that you can't get to Easter unless you go through these 40 days.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it is 40 days excluding Sundays.
Mm-hmm. Little Easters. Because every Sunday we celebrate resurrection.
So that is a reminder. And one of the things that I always loved about Lent growing up is the fact that the liturgical color is purple.
Yeah.
And you're displaying purple.
So just like what you're wearing today.
Yes. Liturgically correct clothing. Always
For
a goal.
folks that maybe come from a tradition where they don't use liturgy, or maybe they've heard the word liturgy or liturgical a ton, but they haven't ever put a definition of that. Can you just explain briefly what that is?
Yes. So the word liturgy comes from ancient language meaning the work of the people. And so liturgy, it are words that we use, traditions that we have that are the work of the people, how we as Christians have traditionally been able to experience the divine. And so aspects of liturgy that we find in our worship services are communal prayers that we say, things like the Lord's Prayer, if there are things affirmations of faith, calls to worship, all of those things are liturgy because they are the work of the people. And so when we talk about the liturgical calendar, it is this formation of the Christian year that is how we live out our faith through worship. And so the Christian year starts in Advent, at the beginning of Advent, preparing for the birth of Jesus. And then we have Christmas, we have Epiphany, the season of Epiphany. And then we begin the season of Lent with Ash Wednesday that leads us to Easter and Easter season. And then we have Pentecost.
And more Pentecost. And more Pentecost.
Or the season of Ordinary Time.
Ordinary Time.
Because they are the Sundays after Pentecost. Pentecost is more of a day than a season. But it is, so we kind of have this church calendar, this liturgical calendar that weaves through and that enables us. I love the church calendar because I think it enables us to kind of figure out where God is in different seasons in our lives. and not just, fall and spring and winter, but in seasons of great hope and expectancy, and seasons of hurt, and seasons of the ordinary, where we're just kind of going along, and seasons where there is like amazing Holy Spirit moments happening, and seasons of resurrection. So that's one thing that I think is really kind of special about that tradition. I know not all traditions do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important part of our tradition.
It'd be great to have a graphic right now that, the rainbow graphic of the more you know.
With all of the different, I have one of those actually when I've taught worship for licensing school that has like all of the different colors, because there's different colors for the different seasons. And so purple is our color for Lent, and preparing. So why is Lent, why is this liturgical season important to you?
I think for me, it's because it has always seemed very practical. We're preparing ourselves in Advent too, but Lent has kind of the added, there is a lot of practice happening in it that is very intentional about how we get ourselves ready. And I think that's kind of cool, and I like the structure to that and the commitment that we put in with that.
I love the structure of Lent. I compared it a little bit ago to Advent, but Lent, you're working each day, and you have, like a lot of us have daily devotionals that we read, or and maybe put in a little more practice than just, we're preparing ourselves for Christmas. We're preparing ourselves for the resurrection day, but we have to live through Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and all of, especially Holy Week, is so special because, it's not happy, clappy,
right?
Worship, fun time. It's not. It's really a time to reflect and think about, where we fall short and how we're moving on.
Right.
So that's one thing that sticks out to me.
I'm a little similar in that it sounds funny, but I love the darkness of Lent. And I said it at high school Bible study last night. I think there are folks that they're either in a Christian tradition where they don't celebrate Lent, or they're part of a religious tradition, which there are other religious traditions that celebrate seasons like this of repentance and deep thinking about their spiritual self. But without that, I think we really wait on big tragic things to happen to us before we will reassess if we're living a good life. We'll wait until that friend dies in a car accident for us to go, oh my gosh, life is short. Or we'll wait until we get a cancer diagnosis to go, oh my gosh, do I love my job? Am I spending enough time with my family? And I think Lent is a beautiful spiritual discipline of every single year going, life is really short. What am I going to prioritize so it has the most meaning?
Yeah.
And for me, that's really powerful every year.
Someone during the pandemic referred, we were talking, and they said it's like a prolonged Lent.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Waiting for resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it was, I consider myself a little bit of a liturgical nerd. I love like the church calendar and the colors and just all of the practices, hence dressing liturgically appropriate. But I thought it was just so incredibly beautiful that when Pulaski Heights, when we finally opened up our first worship service after this prolonged Lent, after the pandemic, after we had this prolonged experience, this prolonged Lent, I thought that it was so beautiful that our worship service that we opened with and reopened with was Easter. It was the service of resurrection, which was just so incredibly appropriate. I think that Lent is meaningful to me. Every year it's this reminder of asking questions about how to reconnect with God. How are we preparing for that Holy Week? what's we had our Ash Wednesday service, and you preached, Abbey, and asked that question about like the barriers that are keeping us from God, and how to remove those barriers, or how to try and implement practices that enable that connection more deeply. And so every year there's this invitation to consider that, and I love that. I think it's important for me to have that reminder every year. Why do you think, or I guess, why do you think Lent is important? What do you think that this season of preparation, of discipline, of waiting, what does this season have to offer for the modern day church? It is an ancient practice. This ancient practice, like you mentioned, Ellen, there's other traditions that also have this season of repentance. But what does this tradition have to say to us today? This ancient practice of Lent. What do you think it has to offer to the modern church?
I think in a time where everything is so fast, and we like to move. I mean, we don't like to stop and do anything. I mean, we're always going from one place to the next. We're always moving. We live by our calendars.
Right.
We live by our phones. We live by our computers. You know, we don't take intentional time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that can really be someplace, the season of Lent can be someplace that we're very intentional. Mm-hmm. You know, and not all of us do it, and we miss the mark on some days.
Right. 100%.
But we can refocus, which is what Jacob was showing us a minute ago. We can refocus, and just a little graphic there. But we can refocus and really focus on where we are as a child of God, and what that means to us.
Yeah. I think that refocusing is so important, and I think for all of us, one of the things that we kind of learned during the pandemic is like that we are so fast paced, and that there was this moment before it got so long, kind of there at the beginning though, there was a lot of, wow, like I'm getting to take some walks, or I'm getting to, do some of these things and reframe my life, when baseball practice is canceled, or, we don't have kind of all of the things, and that this can be this time for kind of taking a breath and reevaluating, even in the midst of the chaos.
I think what's hit me the most this year is that I've become really increasingly fascinated with the ways that our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health are all so intertwined. And there are many of us out there, me included, that are like, I'm going to be the physical health queen or person, like royalty, like I'm going to do it. Or we go, I'm going to go to a therapist, I'm going to get really good mental health because I'm suffering in that part of my life. But so many of us don't think about our spiritual health. And Lent is a very specific time in the same way that when we retool our lives to make sure that our mental health is taken care of, it's a moment to retool our spiritual life and say, am I connected with God, and is my spiritual health as robust as I need it to be a whole and complete person? And that, to me, for the modern church, when it's very easy to hide being spiritually unwell, in the same way that it can be easier to hide your being mentally unwell. I think our COVID era has kind of invited in this world to say those unseen aspects of health are equally as important. And here's a whole season to make it intentional.
Yeah.
One of the things that has come up in multiple conversations for me recently, especially in the class that I have been teaching lately, is that we are not great at knowing how to grieve. And this Lenten season asks us to slow down, and it starts off with a call to reflect on our mortality. And I think there is something really interesting about Lent that it can offer to the modern church in teaching us to slow down and process the things that we're dealing with, and really feel the struggle of them, and not expect it to all be excited anticipation and preparation all the time, which we very much have in some of our other seasons. This is allowed to be a darker time. And in a world where we don't grieve very well, where we have toxic positivity expecting us to be excited and moving on to every next thing, there is something beautiful here in getting to slow down and feel all the things that come with this season, and really move through that, to be truly prepared.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely.
That's what makes Christianity authentic, is its ability to ground itself in what's real life, which is that there's grief and there's suffering. We lose so much when we're just like, this is happy, clappy joy time.
Well, and like Jay said at the beginning, you can't get to Easter and to the resurrection without the crucifixion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The empty tomb doesn't mean anything if there wasn't a body there to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so going through this period and recognizing that, like, that is as much of not only the human experience, but as much of our experience with God, as the praise and celebration and kind of joy in the resurrection. Yeah. So one of the traditions of Lent is that in order to prepare ourselves, we've talked some about spiritual practices. And so we have a submitted question as far as what we are doing this Lenten season. What are we giving up or adding into our lives personally? Anybody want to go first?
I am trying to add in a different type of prayer. I'm trying to be more intentional about meditative prayer and really listening. And so I am doing daily meditative prayer and just trying to be comfortable sitting in silence and paying attention to where God is trying to speak to me. So.
I bought a new kind of journaling devotional book that has space in there for journaling and some devotions. It is called Well Said, referring to the woman at the well, and is written by a female American Baptist pastor. So.
I haven't really decided yet, and I know we're already into Lent, but I you know, I've given up things, I've added on things, I've failed at both. Some things have taken a hold, and I've continued them after Lent, which is, you know, something we strive to do.
Yes.
But I haven't decided this year, and you know, and that's okay. I will decide something, or if I don't, I can reflect at the end of Lent and think, well, that's something I did really well, and that's something I added into my life and brought me closer to God, or made me change something that I'm doing, and that's just okay. So, you know, ha-ha.
I've tried to be really intentional this year about what the motivation is behind my practice. I've heard a lot of stories, and I've had a lot of conversations with our young people about kind of the toxicity of controlling and giving something up, or forcing yourself to do something even when you don't want to. And though there's a lot of merit to discipline, I think I've started to think about it more like making space. And so I've entered into a whole list of things that I'm doing to just make more space for God. So I'm getting up a little earlier every morning to make more time for prayer and for stretching and yoga. I'm taking intentional time away from social media. I'm taking intentional time away from drinking alcoholic beverages and things like that don't give me the mind clarity that I want during this season. So there's a lot of things that I'm trying to be gentle with myself about, in hopes that it feels more like rest with God and less like I gotta do or not do this thing.
Well, and I think, too, that there's, when we think about kind of that history of giving something up or, giving something up that comes from the tradition of fasting as a means of connection to God, they're kind of evolved with that a glorification of suffering. If I'm hungry so much that my stomach is hurting,
I'm doing more work for the Lord out here.
Yeah, like that, or that somehow connects us better to Jesus. And it's, I just don't know that I don't know that was the goal of fasting for the ancient people. And I don't think that that's the goal for us, is to like make us suffer.
Right.
But it is that connection with God piece.
Well, and I think I think I've had this conversation with almost everyone at this table in the last week, but there just is kind of this weird intertwining of kind of like some weird dieting culture stuff that's really toxic, and then mixing that in with our faith and making it an ethical decision that is hurtful to us. And so being careful about how we teach it and how we talk about it, that's kind of a newer responsibility of clergy.
And Lent isn't a diet.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes.
Say it again for the people in the back. Yeah.
Well, right. Like if my Lenten practice, I'm giving up chocolate or sodas, or like the goal isn't to lose weight. The goal is to grow closer to God. And how is that?
It's about what's in your way. And that looks different for everybody.
I'm giving up Brussels sprouts. Or something else. That's what I used to do as a kid. Pick something that I just hated. And
in some ways, when we're thinking about spiritual discipline, that is almost a better spiritual pick to say, what do I hate doing in my life that's causing me like despair, and giving that up. We have a lot to learn from children.
We can also give up people for Lent.
All people.
Not all people. Just a few.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you for joining us for this roundtable from Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church, a podcast of discussions with substance. We hope that you'll tune in again next week. We're going to be continuing this discussion with some more Lenten conversations, and we hope to see you there.